Welcome to the VB Toolbox. In this tutorial I'll be showing you how to create a class which is essentially an object in Visual Basic that can contain its own properties, methods, events, and other functions, as well as collections of other classes. I'm going to try to keep this simple. In this tutorial I'll probably just be creating sort of a employee identification. You can use this for really anything, and what classes allow us to do is eliminate code redundancy. Instead of having to create a whole bunch of variables for separate objects in your main form or application, you can essentially reuse this code and call and create new instances of your class from any other form or portion of your application. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we'll do is create a new project. I am using Visual Studio 2010 Professional. This will work in the Express versions and other versions, specifically VisualBasic.net. If you're using 2008 or 2012, the same principles should apply. So let's go ahead and create a new project. Next, we will select Windows Forms application. We'll give it a name. I'm just going to call this my class. Hit OK. Okay, so we start out with our main form. I'm going to go ahead and expand that a little bit. And what we'll be doing is drawing to this form. I'm going to draw a photo box, as well as an information box to relay the properties or the details of our class. So let's go ahead and go to our Solution Explorer on the right. If your Solution Explorer is not visible, you can go to View and select Solution Explorer. Once you're there, right-click on your project header and select Add Class. I'm going to call this class Employee, and then click the Add button, and that generates a class outline for us. The class is public, so we can access it from other parts of our application. So I'm going to be using the Windows GDI for graphics. So what we're going to do is import system.drawing, and this will allow us to actually draw images to our screen, as well as text and other things. So next up, what we will do is declare some properties for our class. First off, I'll handle the drawing surface. It's good to comment in your code if you ever have to revisit it. If it gets really in-depth, it makes it easier to find things. So I'm going to start off with some private variables that will only be accessed from within the class itself, or populated via parameters that we pass to the class. So the first one I want is, I'm just going to call it G, and this is going to be the graphics handler for drawing to our main form. So I'm going to say as graphics, and next up I want some details for a photo box. I just want to draw a rectangle to the screen, so what I'll do is another private variable, and this will be photo box as a rectangle. Let's go ahead and create a new instance of the rectangle class and specify some default parameters here. I want it to draw 5 pixels from the edge, then 5 pixels in from the top. So what I'm going to do is 5 across and then 5 down. And for a width, I'm just going to set this to about 150 pixels wide and then 200 pixels tall. Next we will do our information box. So I'm going to say private info box, also as a new rectangle. And this one I want to draw to the right of our photo box, so I'm going to give it about a 10 pixel spacing from that. So I'm going to say 160 pixels from the left, and then again 5 pixels from the top of the screen, and I'm going to give this a size of about 250 by 200. Alright, so that defines our drawing surface. Now we can move on to the properties of the class itself, or rather the properties that we want to be able to access from outside of the class. I'm going to say employee properties. I'm going to make these publicly accessible so I can access them anytime I want. So I'm going to say, not excuse me, public. This will be first name. Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. As a string. Then I will do public last name as a string as well. Public department. If you're a game programmer, you know this could be a character class. It might have a picture of your character, or you know, statistics and things like that. And this will also be a string. And what else do we want? How about some notes? Public notes as string. And finally, a status. Is the employee still working with us? And you know, there's probably just going to be two main statuses. So I think what I will do is do a public enum to create a list of possibilities here, and I will call this employee status. And let's go for active or terminated. Okay. So then we'll create a property for that status. We'll just call it status as employee status. So we created a type here essentially that can be referenced. And finally, something to contain the photo of the employee. So we'll say employee photo, and here we'll do a public photo as image. So this creates not a new instance of the image class, but a variable to store an image. Alright, now when generating a new instance of a class, it's nice to be able to populate certain values on the fly. So to do this, there is essentially a new sub that will do this. As soon as a new instance of the class is generated from our form or anywhere else in our application, it will automatically run certain procedures and populate variables as specified. So to do this, we're going to say public sub new, and you'll notice that new is highlighted. It's not, you know, just a custom sub that we would be creating. First variable we're going to want to populate is a handle to the form graphics, the drawing surface that we want to draw to. So I'm just going to call this GFX for graphics as graphics. Then we want to populate our first name from a parameter. So this will be as a string, lname for last name as a string, and we also want to populate our department, so I'm going to say department again as string. Employee notes, I'm going to call it emp notes also as a string. the type has to correspond with the data type that we're populating here. So what else do we want? The employee status. Now, outside of our class, this will not be referenced. So what I'm going to do is just populate or bring in as a parameter an integer value to represent one of these statuses, and then we'll parse that on the inside of the class when it's generated. So we'll say, let's see, I want employee status as integer, which is kind of going against what I just said a moment ago where we want these to correspond. We can work around that. I'm going to show you how. And finally, we want one final parameter, and I'm going to make this parameter optional. I'm going to say optional employee photo, or emp photo, as image, to pass an image, but we don't have to if we don't want to. So we're going to say emp image equals nothing. You have to define when you use optional, you have to have a default setting. In the event that you choose not to use this, it has to have something to default to. So I'm just going to default it to a null value, or nothing. So we can hit enter, and it will finish creating our sub here. Now we can get down to pushing these values to our class properties when the new instance is generated of our class. So first thing we want to populate is our graphics object. So I'm going to say G equals GFX. So we're passing this parameter to this variable. Pretty simple. And then we can start passing our other properties, values. Let's see, we'll start with first name, and this will just equal fname from this parameter, and then last name, department, and notes. So let's just go through these. We'll do last name equals lname, and then department equals department abbreviation there, and next up the employee notes. So I'll say notes equals emp notes. And now we're going to decide what the status is based on the value that we've sent through here. So we're going to set this employee type based on that value. There's going to be, since we have two possibilities, we're essentially just going to have 0 and 1 to pass through here. So we can say select case emp status, and then we'll say if it's 0, case 0, then status equals, and it's going to list our enumerated values here. If it's 0, then we'll set it to active. Case 1, status equals terminated. If you want to have a default value in case, for some reason you need some sort of error checking, oh, the user entered a 3 instead of 0 or 1 and it's out of our range, you could do case else and then just have a default value. So we could say status equals active by default if any other value is passed that was not recognized. Next up, we'll say photo equals emp photo. So this emp photo value, if we do not specify a photo, it's going to return a null value. So this will just this variable will remain inactive until something is added, an image is added to this. So this generates a brand new instance of our class, and it's all set up and ready to go. Now what we need to do is have a way to actually display this information on our form, and you can do this in various ways. You could put text boxes or anything else and just draw those values individually. In this case, I'm just going to fall back on drawing everything as an image. Okay, so I'm going to draw these boxes and then draw these values as a string to the form itself. So imagine that this is a paint palette and we're just going to draw everything on here instead of creating text boxes and all that other stuff. If you want to use text boxes, you absolutely can do that. I'm going to go ahead and save my project here. So we're going to create a new sub called draw. So it's going to be a draw method that we can call from anywhere. So let's type public sub draw. We don't need any parameters. It's pretty straightforward. So first thing we want to do is clear the drawing surface. If there's already anything drawn to the screen, we'll want to wipe it out, kind of etch a sketch style here. So I'll say clear drawing surface. To do this, we will access the properties of our graphics object and call on the clear method. We'll say g.clear, and here you can specify a color. If you want to reset the background color of the form, by default you have this sort of Windows gray. You can set this to any value and it should be overwritten with the color that you specify. I'm going to keep that gray value, and it has a special name. So instead of saying, color dot, antique white or aqua or whatever, I'm going to say from name, and the name of that generic gray color is just called control. If you want, you can use another color of your choice. Next up, we're going to draw the employee photo box. So I'm going to say employee photo box. So what we'll do is we'll say g dot fill rectangle, and we'll pick a brush color to fill it with. I'm going to just grab Alice Blue here from the top, and the rectangle, you can either draw a new rectangle, but we've already specified the properties of our boxes up here. We have a photo box and info box, so we've already generated a new rectangle that we can use here. So I'm just going to reference that photo box. Alright, easy enough. And then I'm going to say G, just for fun, I'm going to draw a little black border around the box just to give it some style. And I'm going to set the pen color. I'm sorry, that's not a fill rectangle. I want to draw a rectangle. Otherwise it's just going to fill in over our other one. When you draw a rectangle, it just draws an outline of a rectangle, whereas a fill rectangle fills in a whole area. So the pen color I'm going to use is just black. If you want your border to be a different color, that's fine. And I'm going to draw this in the exact same position as the photo box, so I'm just going to reference photo box again. So it won't fill in this blue area that we created, it'll just draw a rectangle around it in the same coordinates. Alright, now we have to check and see if a photo was passed into the object. So we'll say if photo is not nothing. If that value is not null, then let's go ahead and draw whatever image we sent here. So we'll say g.drawImage, and the image we want to draw is the photo that was passed in. So we're going to grab our photo variable from above, and then we will say where do we want to draw this? Well, I want to draw it to a new rectangle. I'm going to create a new rectangle from our photo box because I want just a little bit of a margin around it. I don't want it to draw all the way to the black border. Maybe just a 1 pixel margin to give it some space and depth. So let's say rectangle. I want to draw a rectangle here. This is going to be the location on the screen that we're drawing to, by the way. So what I'm going to do is take our photo box X property, which is where it's drawing on the screen, and I'm just going to add 1 pixel to that, and then I'm going to do the same with photobox.y, whoops, showing the Y location of our photo box, and I'm also going to add 1 pixel to that. So it's 1 pixel in and 1 pixel down from our frame or border that we drew. And then I'm going to draw the photo dimensions here, or draw our photo to the dimensions of the box. So I'm going to say photobox.width, and I'm going to subtract 1 pixel from our width here, and photobox.height -1. So these create a 1 pixel margin on the left and top. This will create a 1 pixel margin on the right and bottom. And there we go. Now what did I end up with here? Got something. Okay. That's simple enough. So now we're ready to draw a photo to our photo box, if a photo exists. Now we'll draw our information, employee information, to our employee info box. So we're going to kind of repeat the procedure we did up here. In fact, we can just copy that. And paste it down here. Save us a little bit of typing. I'm going to change my color here. I'm going to go to maybe a lavender. So our information box is slightly different color than our photo box background. And also, we don't want to draw to the location of our employee photo. We want to draw in the other box that we create on the side. So we're going to reference our info box that we created up here. So it's going to draw at 160 pixels in and 5 down. So we'll say info box and do the same here. Alright, piece of cake. Now we have to specify what information we actually want to draw onto our screen. So naturally we want to draw our values that we populated up here. So what I will do is say g.drawString, and this will be the string that we draw. I'm going to just create a little buffer up here and then kind of break it out by line. Put an ampersand sign and a little underscore to drop down to the next line, and then we'll start drawing our information. I'm going to start with employee name, put a colon there, and close our string, and then we'll draw the value of our the values. So sorry. So we'll say and first name, and let's put a little spacer between the first and last name, and I'll say and last name. And finally we're going to drop it down a line, so we'll do VBCRLF. It's carriage return line feed, and then underscore again to drop down to the next line. Then we'll say employee status, and we want to draw our status. Now status is a type that we created, the employee status type. So what we'll do is we'll say dot toString. So it grabs the string value related to the status. And VBCRLF. Drop down a line, and here we'll select the department. A little space there, and this will just be our department variable. And I'm sorry, we'll drop down another line, VBCRLF. And finally, our notes. That will be our notes variable. Alright, so that will terminate this. When we hit comma here, it terminates that string. So this will all be drawn as a single string, but it will be formatted with these line breaks. Next up, we have to select a font to draw in. So I'm just going to say new font. I'm going to try to think of a font here that should be available on most all systems. So I'll just do Tahoma. How about that? And then we want a size of our font. I'm just going to pick 9 so it's not too big. Alright, now that we've selected the font, we can select our font color. I'm just going to draw in black. And finally, we have to tell it where to draw this big string at. So what I will do is say a new point, which is essentially just 2 numeric values stored that will indicate the position on the screen. So where do we want to draw this? We want to draw it in our info box, but maybe not right on the border. So let's do kind of like what we did above and give it a little bit of a margin. I'm going to say infobox.x plus 5 pixels, and also 5 down from the top, so we'll do infobox.y plus 5 pixels, and close out our drawstring, and we should be good to go. And that concludes our employee class. It's ready to be used in any way we see fit in our application. So let's go ahead and save that. Now we can get to work on our main form class. Okay, so we can bounce back up to our form, and if we double click on that, it will take us into the form code. And so first thing we can do outside of our form load is create an instance or a variable to store a new employee type that we've created. So I'm just going to say dim. That makes it a private variable, accessible only from this form. If you wanted to access it from another form, you could use public. Say my employee as employee. Alright, so what you'll notice here is that we did not create a new instance. Our employee is, it doesn't exist yet. It's just a variable or memory space allocated to an instance of this class. We will have to create a new employee to fire off this new sub. So let's go ahead and add one more variable here. I'm going to call this photo path to store a path to our image that we want to use for the employee photo. So as string. All right. So instead of doing all this, populating, creating a new employee from scratch, I'm going to try to simplify it so we can, make as many of them simply as we want. I'm going to use a private sub. I'm just going to call it create employee, and we're just going to use this to populate our employee class. Okay. So we're going to just go ahead and pass all the same parameters that we used before, with the exception of the photo. We'll handle that a little differently. Also, we don't need to use this because we're going to call that directly. So let's just grab the main information that we want to be able to capture. So like fname as a string, lname name as a string, and department as a string, and notes as string, and finally our status as, try to remain consistent here, as an integer. Alright. So let's see. One thing that would be nice for adding a photo is the ability to browse your hard drive for an image of your choosing. So before we go any farther here, let's go ahead and grab an from your toolbox. If your toolbox is not visible, again, you can go to View and Toolbox. But let's grab a let's grab an Open File dialog. You can just double-click on that or drag it over. And I'm going to name my Open File dialog. If you go to your Properties window over here, you can select, scroll up to where it says Name. I'm going to give it something that's a little friendlier to write to. I'm just going to do OFD photo, Open File dialog photo. And there's a couple of things we're going to want to set here. The filter, and this is kind of important. If you don't want to see every file on your hard drive, only files that relate to what you're trying to do. In our case, we want photographs or image files. You can do PNG files, and you separate these with a bar, and then you'll do star.png, which is the file extension for a PNG file, of course. If you want to add more than one, say you want GIF or GIF images, whichever you call them, do another bar and just say GIF files, and then star.gif. Okay? And that will filter our open dialog. You know, when you go to open a file, that'll filter the results of what you see. Don't think I really need anything else here at the moment. So now that we have that guy, we can come back to our form code, and in our create employee, what we're going to do is when we activate this, we're going to have it pop up a message box and ask us if we would like to add a photo. If we do want to add a photo, then we'll pass. It will bring up the open file dialog, and we'll be able to select the file that we want to add as the photo. So here, what we can say is if message box, and the string, the question that will ask us, would you like to add a photo? And the message box style that we want is going to be VB yes, no. So yes or no, do we want to add a photo? And if we want a title, we can just say add photo. And if our response to this question is message box yes, then we'll say OFD photo dot show dialog. Okay, and that's going to launch our file browser. So once we launch that, if we go back to our form here and double click this, it's going to generate a file OK event, meaning that we have selected a file. So what we can do is say we want to set the path to the file that we selected to this variable up here. So we'll say photo path equals OFD photo dot file name, and that just populates that path to the image. So then when we go to draw our image, it knows where to grab the file from. And then we can go back up to our create employee, and what we're going to say is if the photo path is blank, then me or my employee equals a new employee without a photo. Otherwise, it's going to create a new instance of our employee with a photo in that optional parameter that we selected. So to do this, what we will say is if photo path equals a blank string, and I can't remember if I have to do this or not. I'm just going to set a default string value here to nothing, so it's not just a null value. My employee is going to equal a new instance of the employee class that we created. Okay? So notice how we're using, we're generating a new instance. This tells it, once the employee class is launched, to use this new sub. And that allows us to populate all those values. So for our graphics object, what we're going to use is the forms drawing, the forms graphics. Its underlying graphics will be me referencing form1 dot create graphics. Okay. For our first name, we're just going to use the fname variable parameter up here, followed by the last name, department, notes, and everything else. So we want fname, lname, and department, and notes, and finally the status. So that generates a new instance of our class without the photo. Otherwise, I'll just say else dim, create a variable here to store a new image. So we'll say object image. I'm going to create a new image here as image, and we're going to set the value of this to image dot from file. And what file do we want to use? The one located in our photo path. Okay, so this creates a variable to store the image, grabs the image from this path to populate this variable, and then we can reference it when we create a new instance of my employee. So what I can do is just grab this line up here and copy it, because the only difference is going to be that we're adding an image, and that image will be the variable we just created. Okay. So if we don't have a photo, draw our employee information without it. Populate it with these values, otherwise populate it with the image. And then we'll say if my employee is not nothing, then we want to draw it to the screen. So I'm going to say call the draw sub, this method that we created down here, to actually draw the information of my employee. So we'll reference our class by saying my employee dot draw. Now if we hadn't set this draw sub to be public, we would not see this option when we click this. So okay, and that's it. So now we're ready to actually create new instances of our employee class. Now, in our form load, when our form first loads up, we do not want to create our employee here. The problem is that the graphics of the form, when this is launched, the graphics of the form have not actually been created yet, so there's nothing to reference, and it's actually not going to draw anything to the screen. So we want something. We want this to occur after the form has already loaded. So I'm just going to use something like another form event to launch this. You could use a command button if you wanted. That would work just fine. But I'm just going to grab the form's click event and generate that. We can get rid of this form load. And what I'm going to do is just call our create employee sub from this click event. So when we click on our form, it's going to launch this routine here. So let's call it. We'll say create employee, and this will generate a new instance of our class. And now we actually have our reusable code that we can change the values on. So I like to use my little guy. I call him Rad Marvin, so I'm just going to do that. You can name your guy whatever you want, or girl. And department as string. He is going to be in administration. And notes. This guy is awesome. And he needs a status. What would his status be? Well, I want him to be active. So as we defined in our employee class, 0 indicates an active employee. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. I'm going to save. And let's try launching our app. Yay! Okay, a form loaded, no errors. Now let's see what happens when we click on the form anywhere. Hey, add a photo. Do I want to add a photo? Nah, I'm not going to do it this time. So we got no photo, but it does continue and draw our information. So we can reuse this class as many times as we want. If we wanted, we could create a collection, a list, a dictionary, an array of employees. We could have several employees, and if you wanted, you could create toggle buttons to, tab or toggle through them. Sky's the limit. Once your class is ready to be used, you can use it in any way that you choose. So let's go ahead and try adding a photo. Click the form again. It's ready to go. I'm going to say yes. Let's see if I can find an image. Here's a picture I'm going to use. Just hit open, and voila! Our picture has been drawn in our photo box. It should, because we specified a location and size to draw in, it should scale your photo. Even if your photo is really big, it will scale it down. Because of the dimensions of the box, if it's like a landscape photo, it may look a little weird. This was a portrait photo, it's taller than it is wide, so it looks pretty good. So you can change that as much as you want. You can change these values. You could say see if that'll fit in our box. Oh, Jim got terminated. You want to add a photo? Nah. Oh, there's old Jim. So you notice that it selected the right status when I selected one. He's in the information technology department. So you can create numerous instances of this class, stick them in an array if you want, and access them, or you can write them to file. Really anything you want. So I hope this has been helpful. You know, if you like it, subscribe. If you think it would be helpful for anyone else, please share it with your friends. I appreciate you watching. Have a good day.